Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you can join us here this afternoon. We have several interesting topics to talk about, but we are going to start, of course, by talking about COVID. You all are watching the news and know what's happening nationally. And we're seeing similar increases in the number of cases here in St. Louis. I want to, yesterday, those are the most recent numbers we had, the city of St. Louis had 64 new cases. Now, the day before that, there were 83, and then 63, and then 59, and then 90. So what we're seeing here is a real increase in the number of cases as compared with about a month ago. And there's some interesting information about that. In St. Louis, like across the country, the highest increases are among people that are in their 20s and their 30s. In fact, to date, so since this started in March, about 20% of the people who are in their 20s have tested positive. Let me say that a different way. 20% of our total cases are people in their 20s. Another 17% of our total cases are people in their 30s. But what we've seen is that that increase has been pretty steep over the last 2 to 3 weeks. In fact, on Saturday, I believe it was, yes, on Saturday, when we had 83 cases, Dr. Eccles advised me that of those 83 cases, 78%, so almost 80, of those 83 cases were people in their 20s and 30s. So that's a real concern. We are, of course, trying to figure out what's the nexus of those cases. One of the things that we've done over this past weekend is we visited a lot of clubs, bars, nightclubs, and today we will be sending several letters, will be delivered to several of those nightclubs saying, hey, people were not socially distancing, people were not wearing masks. We know that because we had our folks in these clubs over the weekend. And so we are advising them that they need to shape up, follow the rules, and we'll help them do that. If they're confused about what the rules are or what they need to do, we will be in direct contact with them. I think that, you know, the enforcement side of this, we never want to be punitive, but we do have to exercise some enforcement, because wearing a mask is the critical thing to preventing the further spread of COVID. And I didn't mention earlier, but I'll let you know now, we have had an average over about the last 5 days of almost 35 people a day admitted to the hospital. There's a 2-day lag on those hospital numbers, but almost 35 people a day if you do the average for the last few days. And that's up almost double what it was a month ago. So we're concerned about that. We know that we've got to tamp down this spread of COVID. We want to do it by social distancing, mask wearing, and hand washing. But mask wearing and social distancing are so critical when you're out in the public. So whether you are working at a store or restaurant in the public, or whether you are visiting one of those places, you must wear a mask. That is true in the city of St. Louis and in St. Louis County. You know, we're our region, we're in this together because, of course, we live in the city and work in the county, or live in the county and work in the city, or even St. Charles County, or Franklin County, or Jefferson County. And so, you know, we're back and forth, and the virus is still with us. It's still very contagious, and so we're trying to get compliance and visiting those businesses that aren't in compliance. So thank you. I know that most of you are wearing masks because I'm out and about also. I'm always wearing a mask. Even if I'm just walking down the street, I'm wearing a mask. So most of you are, because I see when I am walking around that you're also wearing your mask. So please, if we can just get everybody to do that all the time, that will be extremely helpful. let's see here. I think today I also want to talk a little bit about the program that we have. Last week we rolled out the program for utility assistance. We rolled out the program for small business grants. And by the way, we are, by this Friday, we will have identified all 800 businesses that are able to get this $5,000 small business grant. Also, by the end of this week, we expect to be actually releasing some of those checks to the businesses. So that's been a very quick process. We've rolled out the rental assistance and mortgage assistance program. And today we are working with the Mental Health Board to roll out $1.5 million worth of assistance for early childhood centers, child care centers. That's very important because we know that child care centers have to have smaller groups of kids. That takes more staff. They have to have PPE. They have to do disinfection. They have to do hand washing. And so those child care centers are very important in order to make sure that we do that in a proper way. I know that many of you, I don't know if we have the questions already, but I've seen them over the weekend. Many of you are wondering about schools. You know, schools are, this morning the Archdiocese and the Lutheran schools both announced that they would be having in-person classes to some extent. I think everybody would prefer, if it's safe, for kids to be in the classroom. And but most of these schools will probably have both an in-person as well as an online component. And I guess the last thing to say about that to parents is expect changes. Expect you're gonna have to be flexible with this, and that is really, really tough, I know. But various school districts will be announcing their plans in the near future. I know that they are all looking at these numbers and looking at where we are, just like we are. We have regular calls with all the school systems. Dr. Will Pinkney, some of you have met Dr. Pinkney. He's the Director of Children, Youth, and Families here in the mayor's office, and he's in direct contact with parochial schools, independent schools, St. Louis Public Schools, and charter schools to try to make sure everybody has the information that they need so that we can provide to them the best information for decision making. So Dr. Pinkney and Dr. Fred Eccles have been working with the school districts on that. And I know that you need to know. If you're a parent, I know you need to know. And I know that you also will make the best decision for your kids, because that's what you do as parents. So appreciate that. Just a couple of other things, a little bit off the subject of COVID here, but in case you didn't see it, Major League Soccer, MLS Soccer here in St. Louis, announced on Friday, Thursday or Friday, that they are pushing back the opening of the stadium until 2023, spring of 2023. Part of that has to do with COVID around the country. And 2023 is not that far off, a little less than 3 years. If you haven't been by the construction site, I say take a drive and go by and see it. It's right there on, if you drive down Olive is maybe the best way to see both sides of it. You'll see Olive or Market, either one. And you will see the construction site. It's quite impressive. So they will begin playing soccer in 2023. And I just learned a little while ago that on August the 13th, so that's about 3 weeks away, a little more maybe, they are going to announce the name of the team. They're going to announce colors and all the things that we've all been waiting for. It's a virtual event, of course, because of COVID. So mark your calendars for August the 13th. We'll talk more about that as the time gets closer. Figure out what time it is and that sort of thing. So that's some upbeat news for us here today. should we go to questions?
We have a couple of
I
questions.
have other things to talk about, but I bet you have lots of questions. So let's go to questions.
Sarah asked the mayor, do you have any foresight about whether or not St. Louis Public Schools will be one of the districts to offer an online option in addition to in-school instruction?
So Dr. Kelvin Adams will make that announcement in due time, soon. But it looks like, based on our conversations, that almost all the school districts will have some online options. So we'll wait to hear more details about that. And I know you're anxious to hear it because school's starting in a month. So, but it looks like everybody will probably do some combination. And, you know, I would just say that I wish our federal government would have had money for school districts, direct to school districts, for them to make sure that they have the right PPE, to make sure maybe that they could have additional teachers on hand so that the class sizes could be smaller, to help them roll out the online virtual learning options. Because this is all new and everybody's struggling to do the right thing, to do the healthy thing for kids and for teachers and staff in our schools. I think everyone would love for kids to go back to school, but it has to be safe. And I don't think school this year, and maybe not even school next year, who knows, is going to look like school did last year or the year before. So we're all going to have to be a bit flexible. But it's certainly important that these, you know, kids, our kids, get their education. We don't want them to lose, you know, to backslide, if you will. And it's important for them to get their education. But it's also important for them to be safe and for the staff to be safe.
Christopher's question, Mayor, writes, he says he's just curious about how meetings have been going about potentially pulling back on reopening and or if the city's going to have to go back on a stay-at-home order.
So, Christopher, you know, that's one of the things that we talk about almost every day. And you may know this, but last week we announced that we were going to hit the pause button on allowing businesses to open to a higher level. Large venues were going to be able to open to 100% today, and we hit the pause button on that and said, no, we're delaying that step because of the numbers that we're seeing. Now, we're trying very hard to persuade you and everybody else to wear masks and to socially distance so that we don't have to pull back even further than that. So please help us out here, wear masks. We don't want to have to pull back on reopening because we know that when we pull back on reopening, of course we affect small business, but most importantly, we affect workers. And when you can't go to work, you can't provide for your family. We also know that federal unemployment is running out at the end of this week. And at least based on what I've seen today, there is not anything on the horizon for extending that unemployment, federal unemployment, which was $600 extra per week. Now, maybe something will happen this week that we're not aware of right now, but that's a real worry because if you can't go to work and you can't get additional funds to support yourself and your family, then that's a real problem. So.
Question from Joe asking about any plans on reopening playgrounds in all of our city parks.
No, Joe, there aren't. And, you know, I hate that. I'm sorry about that. But it is just one of those things. And we know because we're out there all the time, we know that people are using playgrounds to a limited extent. But, you know, we're having to rely on parents to use their own good judgment in some ways. But we really just think that it's right now it's not something that's necessary, even though it's fun and it's great for the kids to get out and play on the equipment. But find another way to run those kids around, throwing the ball with them or that sort of thing rather than on the playground equipment.
We did get a question from Devin who's watching asking what kind of success or how things have been going since we rolled out the rental and mortgage relief through the CARES Act.
So we just rolled that out last Wednesday or Thursday. We have many applications. And we'll be working through those applications as quickly as possible. And on Wednesday, I'll try to have some numbers for you about those applications. But I know at the end of the day, Friday, we had over 1,000 applications. I don't know what it is yet today, but many applications for rental assistance and mortgage assistance to keep people in their homes. And, you know, along that line, we work on homelessness 365 days a year. And we have added many beds to our homeless inventory, over 200. But that isn't really where we want to spend the effort. We want to spend the effort on prevention. I mean, we need to do both, but we've got to do prevention, and that is helping people stay in the homes that they have now. So that's what rental assistance and mortgage assistance is all about, along with utility assistance, which I talked about earlier in the program.
So Donna's question, Mayor, that she submitted, there's been a lot of conversation in St. Louis County about the scaling back of youth sports. Is the city making any changes or coming up with any new rules as it relates to youth sports?
So the city of St. Louis never did allow for youth sports teams. I know St. Louis County did that a month or maybe longer ago, and now they're pulling back on it. And we had not allowed youth sports team, and so that's still where we are, that and playgrounds. I know that youth sports are important. They really are. In fact, some of my really very fondest times were when my kids played sports. I would have rather gone to one of their basketball games or soccer games than go to a professional game, frankly. And so youth sports are very important. But it's just one of those things that we have not yet released to go forward. I think it was the right decision.
We have a question from Christine who says that Lowe's and many other large stores in the city are not enforcing the mask rule. Can the city please enforce this?
We will. If you want to, type in or call us and tell us which Lowe's store, because I know that I read at the end of last week that Lowe's is one of the stores that is requiring masks in all their stores nationwide. Now, I think it started today, if I'm not mistaken. Schnucks, Deerberg's, Lowe's, Walmart, a whole number of stores are requiring masks. So maybe check back today or just send us the address of the location where they're not requiring. Now, the only exception to mask wearing is for somebody who has a medical reason that they can't wear a mask. But that's a small percentage of the folks. So I wouldn't expect to see too many people in that category. So let us know. Just like the nightclubs, I mean, we are out and about. Normally, what we do is bring it to the attention of the manager or the owner of the store or facility, and they usually come into compliance. Sometimes it's just a matter of saying, hey, you got to do this. So you can let us know.
We have a follow-up question on the visits to businesses and nightclubs and such that you mentioned, Mayor. Ryan would like to know if you know how many businesses the city did end up visiting and how many letters are going out.
I don't know how many we visited. I'm sure a dozen or more over the 3 evenings. I think there are 5 letters going out. So, the places that I've been now, I admit I'm not there late, I'm not there at 11 or 12 o'clock at night. But the places that I go, people are wearing masks, except when they're sitting down at a table, maybe having dinner with their own little group. And then, of course, you can't wear a mask if you're having dinner. But where I go, I see pretty good compliance. But I have seen... I've seen some of the postings on social media. Some of you post videos, some of you post pictures, and I know that is not the case everywhere. And primarily it's places where young people go, and I understand you're invincible when you're in your 20s and 30s maybe, but it's really important. So I think 5 letters are going out today.
A few folks asking to follow up on, you mentioned the expansion of beds for homeless. What is the status of new available shelter space for unhoused community members during the pandemic?
So as I mentioned earlier, when you say new shelter space, when I mentioned earlier, we added about 200 beds, 220 I think was the number. We added those beds in April, middle of April maybe, because the normal shelters that we fund and that we rely on had to reduce their populations due to COVID, because they could not have that many people in the space. So we still have those beds, and most of them are full. I mean, they're full, almost full, let's call it that, every day. And so we are working very hard to continue to have spaces available for homeless people, to provide some medical services, to provide screening services, and caseworkers for folks.
We've got a few more questions, Mayor. We have a non-COVID-19 related question from Jonathan about Board Bill 77, which would put the reduction of the Board of Aldermen back before the voters. Do you plan to veto Board Bill 77? Jonathan writes that the number of aldermen and women right now slows progress for the city.
So, Jonathan, Board Bill 77, number one, it has not passed yet. It did receive a vote of 15 to 13 at what we call the perfection calendar last Friday. So it will have to come up for a vote again. At least right now, the Board of Aldermen does not go back into session until the middle of September. I think it's the Friday after Labor Day. And so, you know, if you've been following me, that I was one of the primary sponsors of the bill back in 2012 to suggest reducing the size of the Board of Aldermen then from 28 to 14. And I was an alderman then. So here we are 8 years later, and we're still having that conversation. The voters of the city of St. Louis voted over 60% to change the charter to reduce the size of the Board of Aldermen from 28 to 14. So we'll see if that bill comes to my desk or not eventually this fall.
Back to COVID. Sarah's watching and has a question, Mayor. We talked about youth sports in the city and school in the fall. What about high school sports is her question. Do our restrictions currently apply to high school sports come fall?
They do. They do. I'm sorry to say that, but they do.
We also got a question on a Board of Aldermen bill about the third-party delivery app and what the impact that might have on small businesses to cap the fees that they can charge.
So I don't remember the board bill number of that, but it just passed on Friday. And what it does is it's third-party delivery like DoorDash, like, I don't know, somebody give me a couple of
Uber
others.
Eats, Grubhub.
Uber Eats, Grubhub, there you go. You can tell I don't use those third-party delivery apps too often. But they contract with restaurants to do food delivery for the restaurant. And some restaurants end up paying what is a pretty high fee. And it has to do probably with what they negotiate, but it also has to do with just what the market will bear. And so this bill will limit the amount that a restaurant has to pay towards the delivery service. That bill passed unanimously at the Board of Aldermen. So when it comes here, I expect to sign that bill. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword. One, it is good for restaurants not to have to pay so much. Somebody has to pay for the delivery. I mean, let's face it, delivery's not free. It's either built into the cost or added on to the cost. But it also, you know, may hurt some smaller restaurants who don't have a lot of delivery, because they just might, you know, it might not be advantageous for them to do it. But at any rate, it's a free market condition. I hope that St. Louis still has those delivery services after this bill. And this is this is a bill that's been done in a number of cities across the country. So we'll see how that works out.
We have a couple of folks asking, Mayor, where is your mask currently?
Right this minute, I got a whole stack of them here. So because I'm standing here and I don't want to talk to you through a mask, although I could talk to you like this. It looks a little like a, but because I'm standing here talking to you and I'm not within 6 feet of anyone else, I don't normally wear my mask during these broadcasts, but I wear it all day long, every day, Where's the one I was wearing earlier? I have a whole stack of them here.
I think that's all the time we have questions for today, Mayor.
Great. Please wear your masks. We got to get these numbers down, folks. And, it was said over the weekend that if we would all just wear masks, we could reduce this spread. And, this is not a political statement that we're doing here. This is for health. Don't get sucked into that narrative that, this is a Democrat or Republican thing. It's not. This is just about health. And so please wear your masks. Thanks for being with us today, and we'll be back and visit with you on Wednesday. Thanks.